spiritual person now has, at this point, spiritual person has to become revolutionary, and the revolutionary has to become spiritual.
Mhm.
And because we've really severed our connection with nature, and if we don't, and it's also this idea of connecting with life and death, right? Connecting with the reality of death and our mortality at this time. And if we don't connect with that, then we're not going to be able to be there for life, right?
I'm Dean Walker, and welcome to the Poetry of Predicament podcast, a podcast for people brave enough to face humanity's challenges and problems, and most importantly, our numerous predicaments. The Poetry of Predicament is a podcast meant to inspire us to bring forth grace, beauty, and connection with the web of life in the face of a predicament-laden world. This week in the Poetry of Predicament, we're going to be speaking with some XR activists who are indeed involved in an action now of walking 800 miles in the state of Florida to make an extreme point through non-violent direct action that the governor of Florida and the other officials that are supposedly running that state need to be taking far more responsibility and putting far more action in place to handle the climate change footprint of the state. And so we'll be speaking today with Nick Vazquez, who's actually doing the walking, and a couple of the members of his crew who are there to support. Hope you'll enjoy this inspiring and clear interview with Nick Vazquez and his support team. All right, welcome back, everybody, to another round of the Poetry of Predicament podcast, of course, here on YouTube. And while I've been doing quite a few special focus episodes in the podcast about science communicators, the good, the bad, and the ugly recently, I'm going to shift gears radically to another area of focus for me, just a special interest because I just have a deep respect for anyone who is actually standing up and taking action in these times. You know, just talking with one of the guests today a few moments ago about how this is the real deal. You know, there have been activist actions and times of larger scale activism in the USA and elsewhere. But there's really never been a time when it's been a global concern. You know, we're in a different era now, where it's a different time, and it requires a different presence. It requires a different way of people coming together and individually standing up in whatever way is appropriate for them. You know, I just keep going back to Extinction Rebellion because that's the one I'm most familiar with. And they do a tremendous job of keeping people informed about how they put things together. I'm just thinking mostly my experiences is a lot of conversations with folks with XR in the UK. And we're going to be talking with three people who are involved with XR here in the USA. And particularly, all three of these folks are involved with a direct, really boots on the ground action here, which you know, I'm sad to say it's at a smaller scale, has been for us at a smaller scale for the past couple of years than what I was just mentioning with XR UK and elsewhere. So there's a particular kind of courage and passion and clarity of focus that I'm picking up as I've been hearing the stories about our guest today. We're going to be um, Terry Rankin, who's one of the supporters, kind of logistical supporters of this action, and Donald Zapeda. I hope I'm saying that right, Donald. And he's also coordinator and really core support for Nick Vazquez, who's really the person literally boots on the ground doing a remarkable walking action in Florida for the past few weeks and then on into some more time ahead of us. And I really appreciate all three of you showing up and taking some time to just get us clear. Those of us who might not be familiar with what is it to be an activist these days? What is it to be really boots on the ground, really in facing into a community and in y'all's case, many communities in a row as you're going through these various communities as part of this walk and this action. Um, I feel like I've got a lot to learn in this conversation, and I just wanted to let y'all know that my hat is off to you and my deep appreciation for you taking the time to share with us about what's going on for you, what led you to do this stuff, and what's really the motivation to be standing up the way you are. So, Nick, how about if we start with you, since you are the person who's kind of the more forward-facing uh, person in this whole action. First, welcome, and thanks so much for taking this time. And would you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about why you're doing this? What got you to be doing this?
Yeah, well, thank you, Dean, for having me. And yeah, so my name is, yeah, Nicholas Vazquez. I'm 23 years old. I was born and raised in Miami, which is essentially ground zero in the U.S. for climate catastrophe that is here and coming. Um, and I I ever since you know came to realize how you know how 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 severe the climate crisis really is. It's just been stressful for me, and I could see, millions of young people all over the world are in my position and are just in panic and of not knowing what to do. And Extinction Rebellion really provided the pathway to action. Um, and and so I was kind of one of the founders of Extinction Rebellion Miami, a local group. Um, and so that started up 2 years ago, and we didn't really officially, effectively, successfully launch the chapter, just like many other chapters across the U.S. Um, but it, and so I have a really deep sense of like feeling of failure. Just like all of us, right? We've failed. We've let it it's we've let it come to a point where it's it's too late. We've left it too late, and at this point, it's just we got to do everything in our power, um, because desperate times calls for desperate action.
Mhm.
Um, and so and with COVID, a lot of the climate movement really just kind of flatlined, and 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 I was as we're coming at it, I'm just like, I'm done waiting around. I'm done waiting for government action. uh, we've done waiting for politicians and for anyone else, and I'm just gonna do it, right? Because no one else is really doing what's necessary and what's proportionate to the scale of the crisis, and decided to kind of take it upon myself to go about doing this 800-mile climate pilgrimage. And I do see it as well as it's kind of a sacred walk, almost like a rite of passage, right? Um, to really show our elders, that you know there's some grit here. We got some grit, you know,
Yeah,
and we mean business. We're serious, and we're not going to take this shit anymore.
yeah.
Um, and 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 yeah, there's been a lot of suffering involved, a lot of pain, physical and emotional. Um, but in the face of climate collapse, of the extinction of our species, 800 miles is no big deal. That's
Yeah.
getting arrested is no big deal. I've been arrested already 4 times. We'll probably talk about this more, but
Yeah.
already 4 times since the been arrested 4 times since the campaign launched. And I saw that. I took that as a rest day for me. So
Yeah.
um uh yeah, that's that's where I'm at. I mean, I'm really this it's also, I'm demonstrating basically what's going to happen, what's coming down the line, right? We're going
Right.
to see millions of people being displaced, of people fleeing their homes in Miami and South Florida. There's this quote that I say from Dr. James Hansen, the former
Mm.
director of the NASA Goddard Institute, uh, who predicts that we could see 10 feet of sea level rise by 2050.
Mhm.
That's 10 feet by 2050. And the average elevation of South Florida above sea level is 6 feet. South Florida is gone. It's going to be completely decimated. And families, communities all over this state are going to have to pick up their shit and move to higher elevation, move into another climate affected area, where there's drought, heat stress, all these things that we're facing right now.
Right. Right.
Um, so I'm fed up. That's why
Yeah.
I'm doing this. That's why I'm here.
I
Yeah,
get it. Really, really clear. You mentioned a couple times about 800 miles, and I'm assuming all of that is in Florida. And you're talking about walking. And so I'm wondering if you could just give us a little bit more detail, like where'd you start? Where's it going? And then I'd like to, as soon as possible, kind of get back to also what you mentioned about you've already been arrested a few times. This is the real deal. So could you just start us out with just the logistics, like where are you going from and to, and what's the timeline you're working on, and like that?
yeah. So we started in Miami, um, and the idea is to go to every city, every kind of big city in Florida, and really sound the alarm on this crisis. And our main audience is, we're targeting specifically young people, my generation, going to schools, passing out literature on the climate emergency, and telling them what they can do about it. And I feel it's our responsibility to do that. Um, and so we've been arrested just for doing that. And so it's 800 miles to go from we went from Miami all the way up to West Palm Beach alongside the East Coast, and then cross Alligator Alley in the insane, heat, blistering heat, and
Mhm.
then we hit Fort Myers, um, and Sarasota, and what was the next one? Maybe Donald can help me.
St. Pete.
St. Pete. Yeah.
St. Petersburg, Tampa Bay, and now we're here. I think we might be in Orlando. I'm not entirely sure, but we're here at a hotel right now, approaching Orlando perhaps, and we're headed to Tallahassee. We're headed to the capital of Florida,
Mhm.
and we're demanding Governor DeSantis take this seriously, take our future seriously, and address the biggest crisis that humanity has ever faced.
Yeah.
And he has a responsibility to uh, look after look after us and um, protect us, right? And so, yeah, we're gonna have a march onto the highway, come to the point where we reach Jacksonville, which is the last city before the capital in
Mhm.
Tallahassee, and we're gonna be marching onto the highway in what could be the biggest youth rebellion in Florida's history on the climate, um,
Just
because
to
we're fed up.
Yeah, just to jump ahead to the timeline that we're talking about. I'm sorry, you just said the name of a city that I didn't. Was it Jacksonville?
Jacksonville, yeah.
Okay, so Jacksonville seems like a pivot point where you're expecting to be able to bring in other people to join you in that leg, if I'm hearing you right. Could you say approximately when you're planning on that?
August 10th.
Hmm.
August 10th. Yeah, that's the big date. Is August 10th. Uh, And yeah, we're saying to young people, this is kind of also the beginning of the school year for most schools in the state. And the message here is, are we really going to be willing to study for a future that has been stolen from us, or are we going to come onto the streets and fight for that future? Fight for our freedom, fight for our liberation, and you know, do the necessary kind of sacrificial actions that need to be done in order to um, address this issue.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And let me just jump back a couple of questions ago that I wanted to just get a little bit more clarity on. And maybe Donald, you could, add a little bit of clarity and your own responses here. And I'd also love to hear, Donald, whatever, and for Terry eventually as well, I'd just love to hear, what has you engaged with a project at this scale? This is the real deal for you too. No matter what a person's job is or role is in this kind of an action, um, you have massive skin in the game. And so I'm impressed by that. I want to highlight that. And I'm wondering if you could just start us with kind of some of the, again, bit more of the basic logistics, like how long is this timeline that we're talking about, this 800 miles and this whole action? What was the beginning and what's the projected end of it?
So we started on Earth
I'm
Day.
sorry, Nick, if I could, I was just hoping that Donald could
Oh, sure,
jump in
Wasn't
with that.
I
Thank you.
wasn't too sure.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Take it away.
So the action, as Nick said, began on Earth Day, April 22nd, and we expect to be in Tallahassee on Labor Day, September 6th. How long it goes from that point, it's kind of to be seen. It could be a while. We could have a number of weeks occupying the Capitol. It could be a lot shorter if the governor just gives us everything we want, but it could also be longer if need be.
Yeah. Can you fill us in on just a little bit about what does this look like? On an average day in this action, what's going on? Where do you stay? What sort of things would cause enough friction that you would end up getting arrested? Can you give us any sense of some of those benchmarks that those of us who might not have been in any kind of an action like this, we can start to understand a little bit? Anything you'd like to share about just the daily functioning of what you're doing? I'd appreciate it.
Sure. To me?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm the supply van for the march so far. So if Nick needs food, water, place to rest, I can pull up and help him out. Oftentimes, when he's walking, I'll go to some place that has Wi-Fi and outlets, charge up some battery packs so that we can have a phone that works, whenever he needs it. Also do some outreach or stuff on the computer, a number of different tasks that come up as we are going along. And yeah, what we do at the end of the day typically is we have a spot where we're trying to aim for an endpoint. And does it seem like it has enough parking where we can just pull up the car and it probably won't be a hindrance to any business there. And then sometimes, like when we were going through Alligator Alley, we just pull over on the side of the road and we've managed to, not have any trouble from that. Usually, if somebody says, hey, you need to move, we'll move. And like Nick gets out and then walks the distance we need to move to, we usually can find something close enough. But usually it's a lot of sleeping in the car. People have been putting us up, particularly along the big cities along the way. Although we didn't have a spot really to our first place that put us up since we left Miami was in Fort Myers. So there's a lot of car sleeping, primarily car sleeping, I think, so far. Sometimes we'll take a sleeping bag, sleep outside, pitch a tent, if that seems good. I think most of it's been just passenger side of the car is where Nick is. I'm in the driver's seat, lean back and sleep.
Yeah, got it. Thank you. I may sound silly, but I just have no clue what it looks like, and particularly suited to the Florida environment, which is real different than here where I live in Oregon. So thank you for those details. And um, Nick, I'm curious if you would mind spending a couple of minutes just telling us a bit about what I'm just shifting my view to all of us here on the screen. So I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about what sort of conversations you're having, what sort of mini actions within this action that you're having that end up having you be arrested so far. Can you speak about that at all?
Certainly, yeah. So right, the aim is to reach out to young people and warn them about the essentially the annihilation project that the government is engaged in, right? Essentially sending our generation to death, to be slaughtered, to war. That's what the climate crisis means. It means um, conflict, food and water shortages, and these students, these young people, deserve a right to know. And so we're simply handing out literature. We're going onto school grounds. We're going directly to the students, to the young people, and because that's what needs to be done. Um, and but the authorities aren't. It's illegal. You can't go on school grounds and do this kind of thing and hand out literature. Um, but in the face of you know extinction, in the face of annihilation, it's totally necessary. It's what
Mhm.
needs to be done. um, and and so we kind of do like these once the authorities arrive and kind of shove us out. What I do is do a sit-in. I stand my ground. I say, look, these people, these young people, my generation, deserve to know. And um, and right now, my conscience dictates me to be here and do this. And and yeah, I've been very persistent with that and been arrested 4 times for doing just that.
Right.
um and uh yeah, that's it. I mean, there's also the arrest of uh on the Skyway Bridge to I believe Tampa
Mhm.
Tampa Bay, I think it was. And yeah, that's also just demonstrating my persistence, right? And this is a march against annihilation,
Right.
against extinction, and I'm going to continue on. But I
Yeah.
also got to get to Jacksonville, so I got to be careful with that. So
Right. I got
um,
it.
yeah,
Just a quick question about the response that you're getting, especially I kind of get the flavor of some of the responses you're getting from the adults or the authorities that you're bumping into. But I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about what's the response been from people your own age, your peers when
yeah.
you're meeting with them and you're talking with them.
I think young people are the most receptive to the message here.
Mm.
'Cause they know they're also getting somewhat of an education, right? Hopefully, they know a bit about what's coming, and I think there is that sense of betrayal that government has failed to protect them, and um, they're the most receptive and most actually excited about what I'm doing, what's going on, and with the Extinction Rebellion movement, and they're interested. They're the most animated, right? when they hear about this, um, and and yeah, it's very hopeful when because it's a struggle to reach out to um, different different types of people, different groups, and
Yeah,
um, so it's exciting. It's exciting. Yeah.
yeah. Thanks. Thanks. And Donald, I'd like to just come back to you for a couple minutes because I didn't get to ask you that additional question about, you know, what motivates you. We've heard from Nick about that, and I'm just curious. It's no small deal for you to be doing what you're doing. You're really giving deeply of your time and energy and focus. And I'm curious what moved your heart in this direction.
kind of a long story. Basically, growing up, I went to church, and that was a pretty important thing. And the message that was spoken about there was helping the poor. That's what Jesus was all about, as far as I was aware. And so, fast forward into college, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do. Hop around a bit. Eventually, wind up in international relations. Economic development kind of really spoke to me, and so I was looking into Tanzania. Did like a graph of population versus well-being. There's a metric that they use for that. Tanzania seemed to take up the most space, so I started studying their history, geography, economics, that sort of thing, to help see how I could help with economic development there. And as I was doing that, I came across the unfortunate information that climate change is going to backslide development gains, not just there, but in other countries around the world. And the cause of it is, North America, Europe, and Asia, and that's not where Tanzania is. So I figured I'm in one of those places. I'd better stay here and work on this. If I want what they work for to, stick around, this needs to be addressed first. So pivoted to climate change, co-founded a 350.org chapter. This is before Sunrise and Extinction Rebellion really existed back in 2015. And then, kind of been following climate and trying to work on climate since then. And a lot of the things that Sunrise and Extinction Rebellion brought to the table in like 2018 or 19 or whenever they first started, right, really helped inflame the movement. XR's had the biggest global impact out of all the orgs that I'm aware of. And then Sunrise has been really influential here in the United States. Mm-hmm. And so basically I was working with Extinction Rebellion, and at the time of this campaign was pitched to me to, hey, you want to be the supply van person? I was doing phone calls, like calling people on a list, like, hey, can you do this? Can you plug in? You want to help out? So it was a nice change of pace from like making phone calls, right, to actually be on the ground and doing this sort of thing. So I was like, okay, yeah, sure. I was like, the thing that brought me onto this particular campaign is I was simply asked. And a lot of people just need to be asked, and they haven't been asked yet. Right. And but at this point, I was already, really know how bad things are with climate change, know things need to be done, like substantial, drastic things need to be done. And I think if we can scale this up, this is the sort of thing that can help get us where we need to be.
Yeah. Donald, that's a long time to be involved at the level you've been involved at, with the level of focus and clarity that you're talking about. That's really something. So could I ask how old you are now?
32.
32. So it sounded like roughly 10 years you've been at this?
I'd say I put it at like 2015 is when I co-founded that 350.org chapter. Okay. Yeah, so that's about 6 years. And then before that, I was working on like getting the degree, studying, that sort of thing.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. Well, Terry Rankin, full disclosure, I know Terry for quite a while now, and we hang out together in a number of different online environments, all of them more or less in this neighborhood of how to be able to express what it most matters to us in a very personal way out into our lives and the people we love and so on. And Terry, you are quite an exemplar of that. Can you talk a little bit about how you're involved with this action, and perhaps then just bridge into what got you so engaged in activism?
Well, I think of this season in my life as my activism version 2.0, because I'm obviously not the same age as these two young men, because I was doing anti-war and social justice activism at a more or less dilettante level, I would have to confess, back in the 60s and early 70s. I went to the meetings, I went to the events, but did I belong to the SDS? Did I belong to the, I didn't really take the full leap, the full step, but the sensibilities were there. As a philosophy and math major, it just, was kind of where the moral side of who I was needed to be. then I went into the world of being a corporate drone for, geez, 25, 30 years in the IT and artificial intelligence industry with IBM and Oracle and all of that. And then about, I want to say, about the same time Donald got his lights lit up, I began to just kind of catch a sense of what was going on around 2015, 16 outside that corporate world and the impact it was having. Initially, economically, it got my attention around, with the crashes in IT back in the 2008 and the housing into the same era. And I thought, this is not the normal routine. And so I started paying a little more attention to what was happening outside my life and the fringes of society in the US and around the world. And it didn't take long. I mean, within a matter of probably days or at most a couple of weeks, the whole climate crisis, climate change reality surfaced from every angle. It was coming at me from every single angle. And it didn't take me long to realize, and this is where the emotions come up, it didn't take me long to realize that we were talking about the death of my grandchildren.
Mhm.
We're talking about the death of their mother and their father before those grandkids get to see their late teens. I have one who's 2.5. I have another who is 8 and another who is 10. And they'll be lucky to see their late teens, even the 10-year-old. Certainly the life they experience in those years is not going to be the life we've known as the world as we know it. Sorry for any background noise. I have some remodeling going on and he's doing some sawing. So I apologize for that disruption. But once it hit me that personally and just literally broke my heart, I could not stay out of it. And so I started kind of like Donald did. I started an XR US chapter here in Orlando, and it went nowhere. I mean, I live in Orlando, which is the kingdom of magical thinking. And so getting somebody to wake up to any truth and reality when they're in Orlando, even as a native, is like, here, Eskimo, buy some ice cream, it's just not going to happen. And it didn't. Partly because that's not my strong suit, is to, build a following, as it were. That's just really not my strong suit. So long story short, I ended up moving around within the Extinction Rebellion community. When Orlando wasn't happening, I've shifted over to UK and worked across the pond with them for about a year. And then XR America came up in like March of 2019. And so I joined up with them. And I've been kind of in and out of working with them at the national launch team level. And then I found out about this. And I had contacted Nick. I think we were in touch with when you were XR Miami. There was some correspondence between your group and my group trying to get us to come together. There were only 3 chapters. There was Tampa Bay, Miami, and Orlando. And, I wanted to kind of get a state coordination going on, but we couldn't get that to happen either. And then COVID hit and everything just kind of fell off the radar. And as things started, as the world moved into the virtual reality of Zoom activism, for lack of a better phrase, I found out about these guys. And as Earth Day approached, I saw they were going to really get serious about kicking it off. And I just said, look, I'll help. I was originally going to do Donald's role, but the logistics didn't work out and divine providence intervened. And Donald got to take that on, and he's been doing a bang-up job, a spot-on job of providing Nick the support he needs, logistically, materially, emotionally, spiritually too. I imagine just the companionship. And it's fair to say, I have to remind myself from time to time. Every time Nick gets arrested, there's a video, and the videographer gets arrested, and that was Donald. So I have to remember, these guys have the same skin in the game. It's easy to think, it's one or the other, but no, they're both up to their eyeballs and all in heart, soul, mind, and strength. So that's kind of the path that brought me to it. And why am I doing it? I'm doing it for my millennial age daughter, Donald's age, a couple of years older, and for my grandchildren that she and her husband John have brought into our lives as enormous blessings. Those are the prime drivers for me. There's a meme that's real popular, even a cartoon of a young child asking his dad, "So Dad, what did you do? What did you do?" And everybody knows what the question means. It doesn't have to say, "What did you do when the climate was dying? What did you do when the earth was dying?" When you see that meme, it's so strong subliminally that the question is just, what did you do? So my grandkids already know. And that keeps me there.
Yeah.
Did I touch all the bases?
You did, Terry. Thank you. Nick, if it's okay, I'd like to, excuse me, I'd like to come back to you and as I mentioned in the very beginning, I'm seeing this being different than anything in my old guy lifetime that I've seen and relative amount of study about civil rights movement and other major actions that have gone on before, particularly in the USA. And you've got some pretty heavy hitting mentors and guides available to you. Roger Hallam comes to mind, of course, because of his initial involvement in starting up XR in the first place in the UK. But he's also pretty pivotal in the US formulation of at least one of the two that I'm aware of major groups of XR. And I'm curious, what's that relationship like with, perhaps it's Roger or perhaps it's other activists that you can touch in with? And what are the conversations like to keep yourselves trued up? I call it being centered. If I have my center, I can stand more easily in the face of the adults or the authority figures that I'm supposed to be standing in front of. If I don't have my center, I'm toast. So I don't know how that shows up for you. I'm curious if you would share anything that you can about what's it like to be in this community of people who really do have skin in the game. You really are in the action. And I'm curious if there are any people that are particularly inspiring or, mentors or just valuable to stay connected with in that way.
Yeah, Roger Hallam has been a big major influence in my life. I basically studied him and his research basically since the beginning of my involvement within XR, and he has the idea of how the spiritual person now has, at this point, spiritual person has to become revolutionary, and the revolutionary has to become spiritual. And because we've really severed our connection with nature, and if we don't, and it's also this idea of connecting with life and death, right? Connecting with the reality of death and our mortality at this time. And if we don't connect with that, then we're not going to be able to be there for life, right? We kind of think we're immortal in a way, that we're not going to die. And I think Extinction Rebellion at its core is really open people's eyes in their kind of dramatic portrayal, their shocking theatrical civil disobedience, these kinds of blood of our children actions where they're pouring buckets of blood onto the pavements in front of the government buildings, saying this is the blood of the children being poured onto the streets, that's going to be coming down the line, right? And I think that's really important for the movement, especially. And that we connect with our mortality, right? And something else that Roger says is about being of service, right? Where I am in total service, right, to the sanctity of life, and to the greater good, and I that's who I am at my core, and he's been very motivational, inspiring for me. For he's someone who's also very kind of like not someone who's really seeking attention, doesn't really kind of like, you know, being put on the spot, all that stuff, but he does it anyways, right? Because there's a risk, a greater risk of not doing it. And I'm myself very kind of shy, timid person, and probably, you know, not really, I'm not always coherent at times, and but I have to do it. I have to put myself out there because this is what the times calls on me to do, and this is our responsibility. It's our duty to step up and put our bodies on the line in defense of life. And yeah, Roger Hallam's persistence in truth telling has been very strongly admirable for me. This devotion to the truth I haven't seen in any person, really, in my, you know, in my life, living, right? And it's truly admirable, and it's very courageous, and that's what I'm going to continue to do, right? And he said something about how the intellect at this point isn't really serving us, and we have to get emotional about this situation, or else we're doomed, essentially. And we could kind of look at the Black Lives Matter movement, the whole of it. It was a very emotional struggle process, all of it, and it had a lot to, you know, it was there was this woman, from what I remember, I was at the Black Lives Matter protest here in Miami. I was in the midst of the tear gas, and there was, you know, smoke from vehicles on fire. It was like a war-torn country out there, and it was very shocking. But you know, I was out there, and I continued, persisted, putting my body on the line. But back to the point, it was like there was this woman who was just completely out of outrage, this mother, right, who was screaming at the top of her lungs with this fury, as if she had lost her son, right? The fury of a mother who had lost their son, and was saying that, what she was saying was, I'm fucking angry, right? And in no particular, at no particular person, no particular, but just, you know, spewing the emotion coming from her was this raw, kind of unfiltered emotion that this is what we need for the climate movement. It's all life on Earth. Billions of people are going to starve to death, and if we don't get that kind of emotion, this is genocide, mass genocidal project. All groups of people are gonna, you know, are facing genocide, and it's an annihilation project, and this death machine has to be put to stop. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Roger Hallam continues to be a great inspiration for me, and I just love working with him. But
Yeah.
I can't really think of it. Of course, in the past, you know, you had the greats. You know, I kind of say, you know, you stand on the shoulders of titans. Maybe Martin Luther King, Gandhi, the freedom rides, especially. People, these were young students who were willing to die for the cause, and went into the Deep South and put their bodies on the line. and they wrote their last will and testament before actually engaging in this kind of action. And that's what it means to put your body on the line in the face of this existential threat that we now face. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for the
Thank
question.
you. Thank you for that. That's I just so appreciate your honoring of Roger. I'm imagining that all four of us on this screen are right in the same camp of just honoring the level, the depth of, and the intensity of his commitment to life. I know very few human beings alive today that have his particular combination of gifts to be strong at this time and to be so inspiring at this time. I'm curious if we could just shift gears, because I can sort of feel the envelope of our time together starting to close, and I'm wondering if you could start us, Nick, and then anything, Donald and Terry, that you'd like to add. There might be people who are watching this that have, what did you call it, Terry? Something like a dilettante level of involvement with activism. I certainly can embarrassingly, name that I've been in that role for years at a time. But again, something's different now. And there might be some people who are hearing each of your sharing in this call today, and something might be just getting rattled. Something might be getting shaken up in a good way. And there might be just a little bit more of a toehold for this information, for this sharing that y'all have been bringing, to move somebody into action. And I'm curious if there's anything, again, starting with you, Nick, if you would just share any portion of what you've seen that's been helpful, useful in your transitioning, your kind of bridging from you're upset, you're concerned, but you're not in action, and you don't really know what to do, and you don't really know where to go, and what sort of things help to bring that together, to bring you to focus, and to help you feel supported in this incredibly vulnerable thing that you all are doing. And so I'm wondering if you could just offer any suggestions of resources, of experiences, and maybe practices. How do you keep your heart open when you're out there doing this, and you're out on the front line in this? How do you keep yourself connected with those you love? How do you stay connected with each other? How do you stay sane and open-hearted as you're doing this important work?
Yeah, thank you. I totally believe that we need radical action inward and outward. Something I do is practice called transcendental meditation. I try to do that 20 minutes a day, twice a day. Haven't been very consistent, but I think it's very important that we take that step inward, right? Mm-hmm. And put and check in with ourselves and see, is this the right step to take? I really think there really, kind of back to what Roger was saying, there really needs to be a step change in ambition. We can't just continue on talking about this kind of thing. We need people to step into their power. And that's what I'm doing. I'm stepping into my power, and it's liberating. It feels great. It's amazing to speak your truth. At first it's nerve-wracking. At first it's something I've done actions before where I would go into do these kind of a speak outs in churches and at the malls, at these malls in Florida, right? The kind of beginning of the campaign, and it's nerve-wracking, right? I get on top of some kind of platform, and I go off on how fucked we are, and this is a climate emergency, and and it's very nerve-wracking, but we have to take that step, because and because words are cheap, right? At the end, something Roger says, words are cheap, and 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 taking action is very liberating. um and yeah, I'd suggest stay connected with your friends and family. I definitely don't leave them behind. But if they are um keeping you back, you keep going. You have to keep going no matter what, because this is what the times are called for. We are the greatest barrier. We are our own barriers to change, us and the people around you. But it's about moving on regardless of the consequences, regardless of what people think about you, and just being persistent as hell. um, we need that step uh, in ambition. um, so yeah, do whatever, do kind of whatever it takes to stay sane at these times. If it's you need to um, if you need to spend some time watching Netflix or whatever,
Yep.
do that. Take that time out to really get centered, and or take that break, through meditation, through whatever it is that can keep your mind off the hell that's coming, and what
Yeah.
needs to be done. And then get back and go do the work that needs to be done. So yeah, we need to look after ourselves, and we need to look after each other.
Yeah.
And check in every now and then. So
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, the self-care is so core in anybody who's standing up these days. It's just so important. Donald, I'm curious, do you have anything to add to that? How do you keep yourself sane and centered and connected with people and with your own self?
I guess, yeah, just throw everything that I can at the work, right? But when I feel myself feeling tired or weary, don't try and push through it and potentially lead to burnout, later, but actually in the moment, recognize it, um, either take a break, pause, rest, or like do the work, but with that a bit of a more of a calm mind about it, right? I guess that's sort of what I do to stay rested and sane and all that while doing this.
Right. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Terry, you have anything to add about that? It looks like Nick, you wanted to say something?
yeah, you go ahead, Terry. But I would just wanted to read out this quote maybe after Terry, and
Okay,
kind of
we'll come
in
back.
response to that question. But yeah.
I suspect that'll be a good place to end, Nick. You know how dangerous it is to ask me that kind of question, Dean, because I'm going to wax philosophical here a little. We use the phrase collapse aware a lot because that is a tipping point in human cognition when you become aware that collapse isn't something that's down the road. And it's happening right now everywhere. You see it in the Pacific Northwest with the temperatures and the fires and the drought. We see it in Florida with the temperatures and the fires and the drought and the sea rise, and so on and so on. And that moment of awakening triggers, we overlook the real thing that gets triggered. The real thing that gets triggered is an imperative. Nick has referenced it, but when he said, you said it repeatedly, Nick, it's what has to be done. We have to do this. This must be done. It's what's needed. That's an imperative force that's coming from the marrow of our bones. and it has two dimensions to it. It's an existential imperative because it's our existence, our presence as a species on this planet that is about to be snuffed out. So it's an absolute annihilation of our existence. So it's an existential imperative to keep that from happening. But it's also a spiritual imperative, because with that presence goes our spiritual difference making, sense making. Without that presence, our being may persist depending on your particular spiritual orientation. But what's lost in the awakening to that imperative is the sense of who am I to be and what am I to do? And those are the two fundamental philosophical questions of this age. Who am I to be and what am I to do? And I'm going to plug for you here, Dean, because in working with Extinction Rebellion these past couple of years, I found out what I need to do. But it did, and I thought that was telling me who I needed to be, but it didn't. And when I discovered Bendel's work, Jim Bendel, with his seminal paper that deep adaptation emerged out of, I said, maybe that's who I need to be, is adaptive to what the truth and reality was happening. So I got engaged with deep adaptation. I still serve there, as you know, and I met you there. And what I've learned of your work since then has answered that question for me, who I need to be. Working with guys like Nick and Donald, I know what I need to do. Working with you, I know who I need to be. And I'm just going to plug this 5-week series that you've got coming up. 5 Saturdays in a row, I think, and it's all about transformative connection, resilience in the face of this. And it is where to discover who we need to be, and also sheds light on what we need to do.
Right. Thank you, Terry, and thanks for that unsolicited testimony and
Entirely
endorsement.
unsolicited. I assure the listener, I'm not being paid to do this.
Yeah, yeah.
Nothing in return. No, in all honesty, Dean, without bringing those two pieces together,
Yeah.
the activism and the adaptation, I wouldn't be in a state of connected, resonant harmony with the truth and reality of these times. I just wouldn't.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for that. And just before you read that quote, Nick, which I whatever the quote is, it does seem like a perfect kind of punctuation and ending point for us. As I just want to thank each of the three of you. I'm just going to slow down as a part of the work that Terry was just talking about. There's a way to slow down, which I'm doing right now. And just as I slow down, I'm kind of used to doing this now, and it invites the kind of emotional engagement that I think, Nick, you were talking about just a few minutes ago. And I'm very moved by you guys. And really, it is an honor to speak with you. I want you to know I see you. I really see you. This is a time like no other that I know of. And it's a time for us to stand. And most of us, we need some exemplars. We need to see people doing it, to even know that it's possible. Because most of us don't have we have no idea what is possible, nor what's called for. And in your own unique ways, each of the three of you are standing up to do that, to be an example. So I just really appreciate the conversation today and what you're doing. So Nick, would you, if you have any other words you'd like to say, and then if you'd like to roll us out with the whatever quote you have in mind, you've got the floor.
Sweet. Yeah, thank you for sharing, Dean. Yeah, back in response to that question previously, it was another thing is like, I'm not attached to the outcome, right? I'm doing this. I'm doing what I believe is right, and that's what's important to me. And If nobody follows, then so be it. But I'm just going to keep doing it, and that's because I am of service, no matter what, no matter what the consequences, and no matter what people think about what I'm doing. Yeah, we need to. It's an adventure ultimately, right? This is it. I could die tomorrow. Who knows? Any one of us, we could die at any moment, and we need to connect with that reality. It's our entire world can collapse overnight, right?
Yes.
And so let's step into our power and let's live life fully, finally, at last, and let's have a vision for the future of what we could do in the face of the climate collapse, how we can come together and rebuild. And so to bring in a quote from The Wages of Rebellion by Chris Hedges. Here we go. There is nothing rational about rebellion. To rebel against insurmountable odds is an act of faith, without which the rebel is doomed. This faith is intrinsic to the rebel the way caution and prudence are intrinsic to those who seek to fit into existing power structures. The rebel, possessed by inner demons and angels, is driven by a vision. I don't know if the new revolutionary wave and the rebels produced by it will succeed, but I do know that without these rebels, we are doomed. All right, let's do it.
You guys, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching another episode of the Poetry of Predicament podcast, produced by Dean Walker and the Living Resilience Alliance, www.livingresilience.net. Music today from Michael Hedges, as always, and also Port Blue Into the Sea. Also available on our website, www.livingresilience.net, is a wide array of articles, online learning series, arranging group and individual resilience coaching, and sign up for our every other Tuesday free support group that we call Safe Circle Calls.